Michelle Obama surprised fans on our new podcast by saying her pet peeve about her husband is that he's chronically late. For example, we're still waiting on him to admit he's from Kenya. And as for Barack's pet peeve about Michelle, he's mad that she keeps leaving the toilet seat up. When she cleans it.
It's Min, and that's annoying because she's supposed to be the star. Michelle Obama. This dovetails perfectly with so many other comments she's made about how she is like, what about me? What about me? What did those 8 years in the White House do to my soul? And why isn't anyone asking? They shouldn't have to be told to ask about.
Gutfeld and Megyn Kelly just dropped the pleasantries and unleashed a scorching takedown of Michelle Obama that tore through the myth, fractured the brand, and pulled back the curtain on the polished image built by endless praise. From the media's obsession to the deeper layers of cultural manipulation, they called out every contradiction with sharp humor and unapologetic honesty. There were no easy questions and no off-limits topics, just a heavyweights breaking down the narrative with precision, boldness, and a fearless sense of humor. If Michelle ever believed she was beyond critique, this roast made it clear she's not.
What's that pitter-patter sound I'm hearing in the background? It's the footsteps of Barack running to vote for Trump.
Is it, Michelle? It's not. I've been married for 17 and a half years, and not one was bad. I think she and he married the wrong people.
Gutfeld stepped in front of the camera with that familiar mischievous spark in his eye, the unmistakable look of a man ready to slice through another political figure using nothing but razor-sharp sarcasm. But this time, he wasn't targeting some clueless bureaucrat bungling a policy rollout or a sleepy lawmaker dozing off on C-SPAN. This time, his comedic crosshairs were fixed on Michelle Obama, the media's untouchable symbol of elegance, kale smoothies, and quotes that could double as slogans on novelty mugs. Gutfeld rolled his shoulders, figuratively speaking, and dove right into the takedown asterisk.
They run Michelle. According to a new poll, Michelle Obama isn't as strong a Democratic candidate against former President Donald Trump as many Dems would have you believe. In a hypothetical matchup, my favorite kind, Trump wins with 47% of the vote compared to Michelle Obama's 44%. I guess some of the kids whose school lunches she ruined are finally old enough to vote. Remember that? And what have we here? Is it independent candidate RFK Jr.?
He kicked things off by stating the obvious. Michelle Obama, once the First Lady, had now fully evolved into a brand. She wasn't just a person anymore. She had become a lifestyle, a logo, a living TED Talk draped in designer fashion and glowing under the haze of 17 camera filters. To Greg, she no longer resembled a real individual, but had transformed into the human version of a carefully curated Instagram feed, flawlessly composed, relentlessly positive, and entirely disconnected from anything that felt remotely real. Asterisk.
They know that they're having a hard time with men.
Right.
Doesn't seem like this is the right strategy.
No.
She basically says that they're hurting women by voting for Trump.
But I think they don't understand that where it comes from in the first place is that people are sick of being told how bad they are and talked down to, and you know, the condescension doesn't work. None of what they're doing really works. I mean,
Michelle Obama. It's amazing. Every word she says about Barack Obama is negative. I can't think of her sitting there just waxing poetic about him, complimenting, he's brilliant, he's a great dad, he was the greatest president, whatever a normal wife of Barack Obama would say. Every time she opines, it's something that reflects poorly on him, how he's insensitive, how he's not a talker, how he doesn't know how to relate to people, he doesn't keep the same schedule as she does, and now we're talking about you can have a bad decade?
Greg couldn't help but marvel at what he called the greatest marketing feat of the century, Michelle Obama's ability to present herself as a humble public servant while living a life more luxurious than most royals, cashing in checks that could make even Silicon Valley CEOs do a double take. He quipped that she might be the only person who could release a memoir titled Asterisk, Becoming Asterisk, and still leave readers wondering who she actually became. It read like a mix of self-help advice, personal therapy, and sentimental greeting card wisdom, and yet, somehow, It's sold by the millions, asterisk.
That transitioning line was meant to get attention because her podcast is failing. No one wants to watch it, and she's not used to that. You know, she's used to being the center of attention. Everyone's interested in me. I don't have to try hard. And so now she's embarrassed. And so I think she's intentionally dropping these little, nuggets in these podcasts just so she can get pickup and talking here and there about her marriage because she knows that she'll get pickup if she talks about him. It's kind of like Meghan and Harry, where it's like the man is the star and the woman is kind of the glamour. She's like the also-ran. Like we're interested in her to the extent she's going to tell us about him. And she knows.
Then he dove into what he called the real comedy gold the media's obsession with worshiping Michelle. Every time she delivered a speech, no matter how vague or recycled it was, the press reacted like she just reimagined democracy through a series of yoga analogies. Greg joked that watching journalists cover Michelle was like watching a room full of adults at a kid's dance recital, clapping wildly even when everything was offbeat and completely upside down. To him, it wasn't journalism at all, it was just theatrical cheerleading in disguise.
So true. And it reminds me of my new book, Women Are Invisible at Age 50, and I couldn't be happier. She says, women are invisible. Which women is she talking about? Oh, I see her women in commercials, in TV shows. They're all over the place and they're all yelling at everybody, telling them, I don't.
He couldn't help but dive into her food legacy, breaking down Michelle's notorious school lunch reform with surgical sarcasm. What was intended to promote better nutrition, Greg argued, ended up feeling more like government-approved punishment. For simply being a kid, he joked that if you ever wanted to convince your child to run away from home, all you had to do was hand them a tray full of bland, beige mystery grains and limp-steamed vegetables with her official stamp of approval. While Michelle spoke about vibrant health and energized students, the reality in schools looked more like an underground trade system where pizza slices were swapped in secret behind vending machines. Then came the podcasts, the Netflix deals, and her endless personal rebranding. Greg said Michelle had built a resume that looked like someone auditioning to become the CEO of culture itself. She was no longer just a former first lady, she was a walking brand ambassador, preaching empowerment, empathy, and excellence, along with every other buzzword you could print on a coffee mug. If it carried inspirational flair and broad appeal, Michelle had already trademarked it, but Greg didn't stop at the surface-level branding. He went after the core contradiction. Michelle often positioned herself as a symbol of struggle, grit, and resilience, even though she had spent the past 2 decades living in the world's most elite and exclusive circles. To Greg, hearing Michelle speak about hardship was like listening to a 5-star chef complain about frozen dinners. Everyone has a past, sure, but Michelle's version had been buffed, marketed, and sold like a luxury product.
It's a lie to begin with. And, tell it to your husband who showed up at that Democratic campaign office when people weren't rallying behind Kamala Harris and called a bunch of Democrat voters, half of whom were men, half of whom were black, racists and sexists, because they weren't getting behind Kamala Harris. That doesn't seem like going high to me. And her husband and she have been out there suggesting Trump is Hitler. She wouldn't even go to Trump's inauguration. It doesn't seem like the high road. So she wants credit for taking the high road, even though, of course, she hasn't and she doesn't. And it's not where she spends her time. It's just like anything, Maureen. Like you and I, we wouldn't be out there being like, we only take the high road. We have nothing to compensate for. We're perfectly content on the low road, and we'll make no apologies for it.
Then Megyn Kelly stepped into the roast with the precision of a scalpel slicing through silk. She didn't come armed with jokes, she came with hard facts. Megyn deconstructed Michelle's carefully crafted media persona with a sharp focus of someone who had grown tired of the unchallenged sainthood. Michelle had always marketed herself as relatable, a woman of the people, grounded and authentic. But Megyn pointed out that nothing about Michelle's life reflected the average experience. She lived behind private gates, flew on charter jets, and dined with billionaires. Megyn quipped that if Michelle was relatable, then a unicorn on. A hoverboard must be the picture of everyday life. Her version of normal included book launches planned like military missions and interviews lit with the kind of precision you'd expect on a Spielberg film set. Megyn then turned her focus to Michelle's strategic silences, the topics she consistently sidestepped, and the answers that seemed carefully calculated to maintain universal appeal. While many applauded Michelle for her grace and composure, Megyn saw something different: an intentional reluctance to say anything that might disrupt the admiration. She argued that Michelle had perfected the skill of delivering words that sounded deep but dissolved under any real scrutiny, vague enough to satisfy everyone, pointed enough to suggest substance, but never truly daring enough to take a stand, asterisk.
She'll talk for 2 hours. None of her opinions are new.
Correct.
They're all assigned opinions, like women in their 50s and 60s are invisible. That has been said for.
Betty Friedan said that in the late 60s.
Yes, and then the other thing about men, they're all like these. I hate people who only have assigned opinions. Her husband's like that.
Yes.
There's never anything new, but you're supposed to pretend it's new when they say it, and it's not. So in your face.
And then there was the merch. Michelle's words weren't just speeches, they were branded assets slapped onto t-shirts, mugs, journals, and just about anything you could stock in an airport gift shop. While she constantly spoke about rising above division, Megyn pointed out how she subtly fueled it. The language was always emotionally charged: us versus them, light versus dark, hope versus fear. It was rhetoric built on contrast, packaged as unity, and somehow never questioned by the press. To Megyn, Michelle could claim the sky was red and within hours, 5 headlines would crown her a groundbreaking voice in meteorology. Then came the political double standard. Michelle rarely endorsed specific policies outright, but she had a knack for criticizing the climate, pointing fingers in vague directions, and then pretending she hadn't stirred the pot at all. Megyn called it the art of passive provocation, a way for Michelle to take jabs at her opponents without ever appearing combative. She didn't debate, she implied. She didn't argue, she sighed. And somehow, the media reacted as if she had brokered global peace with a single raised eyebrow, asterisk.
Obama, obviously, the ladies of blue origin. Everyone's too afraid of Jeff Bezos to touch the Lauren Sanchez thing. It's like, we've been having such a good time just saying what's obvious about that. Like, Michelle, she should change her name to Misery Obama. That's really what I think of when Misery Obama never has a positive word to say. Never. Not about children, not about family, certainly not about her husband. By the way, before we leave this topic, here's her latest soundbite that made the rounds. This happened on June 18th, but I was off. Here it is.
Greg came back with a smirk, saying Michelle's public image had become so meticulously managed, it deserved a spot in the Smithsonian right next to the Hope Diamond. Her appearances were flawless, every hair in place, every word delivered with precision. Entire think pieces had been written just about her arms. It was like fitness obsession had collided with political fanaticism. Greg joked that if government policy had been as solid as her biceps, the national budget might have been balanced by now. Megyn wrapped things up with a powerful close. She argued that Michelle wasn't considered untouchable because of brilliance, but because of utility, a symbol ruled out whenever things got politically inconvenient. Michelle was presented as the calm during the storm, the elegance in the chaos. But not because it was genuine, because it was safe. And that, Megyn said, was exactly the problem. Leadership isn't supposed to be about playing it safe, it's about confronting reality, and the truth doesn't always earn you applause.
Because when you're thinking of victims of this awful world, you think of Michelle Obama and how terrible we've all been to her. This woman is a one-woman destitution derby. Every time we check in on her at her podcast, she is feeling sorry for herself. She is criticizing Barack Obama or this country. She never has a positive word to say about anything. And the latest example was when she went on this other guy's podcast, Jay Shetty. She goes and sits down with him, and he asks her, what are you afraid of? And she starts off by saying, well, It's not, my fears aren't for me. You know, I think about the streets.
Greg gave a metaphorical nod and wrapped up the roast with his signature blend of wit and
But,
insight.
according to Greg,
He made it clear Michelle Obama wasn't a villain. She was a reflection of a culture so hungry for heroes that it was willing to build them. From airbrushed images and carefully crafted, middle-of-the-road sound bites. He said Michelle hadn't necessarily done anything wrong, but as long as polished personas continued to be sold as truth, he and Megyn knew their work wasn't finished. Their goal wasn't just to mock the myth, it was to challenge the world, to peek behind the curtain and maybe, just maybe, laugh at the fact that nothing real was ever hiding there. Megyn picked the thread back up effortlessly, diving even deeper into what she called the Michelle paradox. Here was a woman with access to power most could never imagine, with wealth and cultural influence that rivaled some of the most prominent elected officials, and yet she still carried an image of someone constantly underestimated. To Megyn, that idea was absurd. She highlighted how Michelle's entire narrative was built around overcoming unseen barriers, all while sipping champagne in rooms so exclusive that most Americans would need a detailed map and a government-issued pass just to get through the front door.
What's going to happen to her girls if they're not recognizable? And she goes on a diatribe about the arrests that we're making of illegal immigrants, and that now we all have to live in fear, people of color, because it's a racist Republican Party that's running America now, that people of color, I guess, have to live in fear because we're all a bunch of racists who made her a billionaire and elected her husband president twice. But we're so racist, you see, we could just grab any random person of color in the street and send them off.
Megyn dove straight into the real comedy Michelle's constant portrayal of herself, the eternal outsider. She said it was like Jeff Bezos walking into a warehouse and complaining about the working conditions. If Michelle was truly an outsider, then the Pope must be a religious skeptic. Michelle didn't just orbit politics, she seeped into every corner of culture. From book clubs to playlists, cooking videos to workout routines, there was no space too small for the brand to occupy. Megyn joked that the only place Michelle hadn't made an appearance yet was in a Marvel movie. But just wait, she might show up wearing a cape, delivering a motivational monologue. That's when Greg Gutfeld re-entered like a wrecking ball, smirking and ready to dial Megyn's critique up to 11. He took her precise breakdown and turned it into a full-on takedown, saying Michelle's transformation from First Lady to cultural oracle wasn't so much a natural evolution as it was a perfectly engineered PR campaign. Greg claimed that if Hollywood ever held auditions for the role of wise woman with well-timed concern, Michelle would be the default casting choice. She didn't just adjust to fame, she weaponized it.
Which leads me to Michelle Obama. Every day, she's dropped another negativity bomb on us, whether on her podcast or on someone else's. I mean, this audience knows she never says anything positive. It is all complaints. So she goes on another podcast. She's promoting her show, so she's making the rounds. The Diary of a CEO podcast, and actually found a way to bitch and moan about how hard it is to live in the White House.
He mocked how Michelle's media coverage often read like fan fiction, where even her slip-ups were rebranded as strokes of misunderstood genius. If she blinked, it was called reflective. If she sighed, it became soulful. If she dodged a difficult question, it was hailed as strategic patience. Greg joked that Michelle could spill coffee on a reporter and the headline would spin it as a heartfelt gesture gone slightly off course. But neither Greg nor Megyn were fooled by the polish. They both saw through the glow, recognizing it as something carefully choreographed, stage-managed, and protected like a national treasure. If there was a real Michelle behind the brand, she was buried beneath layers of publicists, advisors, and heavy Instagram filters. The roast kept rolling, and just when it seemed like every angle had been hit, Greg and Megyn circled back to the most biting irony of all. Michelle Obama, the woman who once called herself an outsider, had morphed into the ultimate gatekeeper. She wasn't challenging the system anymore, she was thriving in it, perhaps more than anyone else. Her journey had shifted from being an inspiration to becoming insulation, wrapped in a protective media cocoon too timid to challenge her. And that, they said, was the real punchline. Because in the end, it wasn't about who Michelle actually was, it was about how flawlessly she played the part. Curtain closed.